Long enough to cover the subject and short enough to keep it interesting. Welcome to Outta My League. I'm Nick Diaz. Conference tournament starts this week. And conference tournaments at this time of year can be very telling, but also misleading at the same time. So there have been years where one team gets hot and they win their conference tournament and they weren't that high of a seed in their conference tournament to begin with. And then all of a sudden they come out of nowhere and they become the trendy team to pick in the NCAA tournament. And that team, like say Auburn in 2019, they end up actually making the Final Four and they live up to that trendy pick. Then another year, the exact opposite happens. The trendy team that won their conference tournament that wasn't supposed to just falls flat on their face in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Because at the end of the day, some teams know how to carry momentum and others don't. Also, the top seed in the conference tournaments are rarely motivated because they've got their NCAA tournament seeding pretty much done and there's nothing really they can do for the most part to change that, with some exceptions. But at the end of the day, if you want to win your conference tournament, I believe you got to have the 3 M's. What are the 3 M's? Momentum, motivation, and matchups. Momentum, who can sustain it and who can't. Motivation, how badly do you need a win or two, or hell, win the whole conference tournament in order to get to the NCAA tournament. And matchups, who gets lucky in certain brackets and who doesn't. So I'm not a huge predictions guy. That's not really my calling card, but this is March Madness, so fuck it. Life's too short. All right, so let's just look at the top seeds with the double buys. We'll just evaluate them. Who has the 3 M's? Alabama, number 1. Number 2, Arkansas. Number 3, LSU. And number 4, Tennessee. Let's start with Alabama. Alabama, motivation. They're an NCAA 2 seed, win or lose, in the first round in the semis, or if they win the whole damn thing. So maybe there's some lack of motivation. Momentum. Although Alabama has won 3 in a row, they don't have a lot of momentum because they were losing at halftime to a bad Georgia team, and they almost lost at Mississippi State. So they're looking a little sloppy in the last 3 or 4 games. Matchups. Alabama does not have Arkansas on their side of the bracket, but they will probably have to play Kentucky in their first game because Kentucky's going to play Mississippi State in the first round of their bracket. And Kentucky has momentum. Kentucky needs to win the SEC tournament or else they're not getting a bid to the NCAA tournament. And Kentucky has a lot of talent, as we all know, that can match up with Alabama. So Alabama qualifies for none of the 3 M's. So let's go to Arkansas. Motivation. Arkansas is a projected 3 seed, but they do have some motivation because if they win the conference tournament, they could bump themselves up to a 2 seed. Momentum. Arkansas has all the momentum in the world. 8 straight wins and 11 straight SEC wins. They're the hottest team, arguably, in basketball today. Matchups. Arkansas does have to play the winner of Georgia and Missouri, and both are scrappy teams, but they should win that. However, Arkansas does have LSU on their side of the bracket. And LSU is a team that Arkansas played twice this year, and they split the regular season series with. They're 1-1 on the season. And the first time Arkansas played LSU just blew them out at home. The second time, LSU was winning at halftime at Arkansas, but then Arkansas came back and won in the second half. So it won't be easy for them when it comes to matchups. Now let's skip over number 3, LSU. We'll save them for last. Number 4, Tennessee. Motivation. Tennessee right now is a projected 6 or 7 seed, so winning couldn't hurt, but I don't think losing one quad 1 game to a Florida or an Alabama is going to bump them down to an 8 or 9 seed, which you don't want to do. So they don't really have much motivation, but necessarily they don't lack motivation either. Momentum. No momentum exists up in Rocky Top right now. They are playing their worst basketball at the worst possible time. Matchups for Tennessee. Also terrible. Tennessee's probably going to have to beat Florida, then beat Alabama or Kentucky just to get to the SEC title game. Then lastly, number 3, LSU of the 4 buys. Motivation. LSU needs to win a couple of games because of the 3 biggest bracketologists. None of them can make up their mind what seeding LSU is going to be in the NCAA tournament. One of them either has a 7 seed, LSU has an 8 seed, or LSU has a 9 seed. Usually these bracketologists are all in alignment, but for LSU, they can't seem to make up their minds. It's kind of all over the place. Which means LSU, to feel comfortable on Selection Sunday, needs to get at least one Quad 1 win, or maybe two Quad 1 wins, to assure themselves of getting off of that dreaded 8-9 line that we all have talked about, because you're basically just some number 1 seed sacrificial lamb in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And you don't want to be an 8 or 9 seed. So LSU has motivation. LSU's momentum. LSU finally showed great maturity and just won their biggest road win of the season at Missouri. So they have some momentum. Matchups. This is where it gets interesting now. So I mentioned the Arkansas-LSU series matchup earlier in the pod, but listen to this. LSU has a win this year versus every team on their side of the bracket. They've beaten every single team on their side of the bracket. Arkansas, Georgia, Missouri, Ole Miss, USC. LSU has beaten every single one of them. So to recap, to me, the SEC teams that check off all of the 3 M's that you need to win your conference tournament, motivation, momentum, and matchups, the teams that check off all of those 3 M's are LSU, Kentucky, Florida. Florida's a projected 8-9 seed in the NCAA tournament, so they need to get off that. And Arkansas. LSU, Kentucky, Florida, and Arkansas qualify for all of the 3 M's. So my prediction is the semifinals are Kentucky versus Florida and Arkansas versus LSU. And I'll say Arkansas beats Kentucky in the SEC championship game. There's my prediction. Have at it. Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, or follow me on Twitter and Facebook in the description link below.